By the way, I can't see you. Oh, there you are.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I am good. Thank you very much. And thank you for agreeing to chat with me. May I ask you to
Sure.
please tell us your name?
My name is Georgie Marquez. And
Very, very nice.
mhm.
And will you share a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you a little bit?
Sure. I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico, but I've been living here in the United States now for a very long time. I came to the States to go to college, to go to architecture school in New York City,
Mhm.
and went to architecture school, graduated from Pratt Institute in New York in architecture, and then lived in New York City for several years, for over 10 years. And then my husband and I, we met in architecture school, got married, and then moved to Virginia. Approximately 35 years ago, 36 years ago.
Excellent. That's a long time to be married to someone. Excellent.
Oh yeah, we've been married now for 41 years.
Congratulations. That's an
Thank
amazing
you.
thing.
Thank you. And we work together.
Oh, he's an architect as well.
Yeah.
And you all
Yes.
have your own company. You work with each other.
Yes. Yeah, we have. We started our own company in 1993.
Okay. And can you share with us some of the projects that you've worked on or some of the places you've done your work?
Sure. We do a lot of federal work. So we've worked for several federal agencies, including Homeland Security, the Department of Defense. We are in Norfolk, Virginia, so there's a lot of government work in this area. So we do a lot of that type of work, but we also do commercial. And so we've done several restaurants in the area and office buildings, industrial work. So that's what we do. We don't really do any residential. We have once in a while we'll do a residential project, but very, very limited.
Okay.
Churches, we've done several churches in the area also, both new and from the ground up, as well as additions or expansions.
Excellent. And how is Norfolk, Virginia? What is that area? I've been there a couple of times. I don't remember very much about it, but what is it like in Norfolk? What kind of a community? I'm sure it's a military community, but is there anything else to be said about it?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. Norfolk is interesting. We actually live in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Okay.
Hampton Roads is 7 cities, basically. So it's one of those things where we could be actually considered a very large metropolitan area, but because it's divided, there's all of these smaller cities. So we have Virginia Beach, which is known as a more of a resort area with the ocean front. Norfolk has some beaches also, and it also has the largest naval station, naval base in the world. So it's very active. Then there's Chesapeake, which is more rural. Suffolk is also more rural. And then Portsmouth, which is a small city. Portsmouth is probably a mostly African-American community city. Norfolk is very mixed, very mixed, both as far as like urban and suburban and demographically. And then there's Newport News and Hampton University has Hampton. The city is where Hampton University is, which is a private, uh, historically Black college
That's where my
university.
daughter went to school. My daughter
Oh,
went to school.
really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's why you've been in this area. Yes, yes, they actually have a very good architecture school. It's the only local architecture school. Virginia has two accredited universities for architecture. One is Virginia Tech, and the other one is Hampton University.
That's impressive right there.
Yep.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And so, how did you decide on that area of work? I mean, was it something that you always thought as a little girl you wanted to build buildings, or is it just kind of by chance?
Um, my grandfather was an engineer, and he was probably the only Hispanic in the construction of the Panama Canal as an
Wow.
engineer. He was an engineer there. He grew up in a very teeny little town on the east coast of Puerto Rico, ran away late early teens, mid-teens, and nobody heard from him for
Mhm.
many, many years. And then when he came back, he had somehow ended up going to engineering school and had actually worked at the Panama Canal. Came
Wow.
back. So I was always so, I knew about construction and buildings from a very young age. And then he and my dad and my uncle built the house that I grew up in.
Mhm.
So I was familiar with floor plans. But then when it was time to decide what to do for college, I was actually torn between medicine, which is what my dad did, and architecture. And I loved doing floor plans and playing around with just drawing. And I was always, I liked the drawing part and I liked the number part of it. So architecture seemed like like a good option. And I did my first year of university at the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras. And from there, I decided that I definitely wanted to go to architecture school. And that's how I ended up going to architecture school in New York.
So, with that background, what can you say about Puerto Rico as a result of these hurricanes and storms that go through there and keep whopping it? How is Puerto Rico now, and what is the what are the challenges that still exist? Because I know a year or two ago we kept hearing about this, and there were some political innuendo out there. But how is Puerto Rico now as a country? Do you have any ties or connections still there?
I have some ties. My brother still lives there, and I have quite a few cousins that live there. I'm not totally enmeshed in the who's who in the politics of Puerto Rico, but I do know that the hurricane devastated the infrastructure of the island, especially the center part of the island. Um, with that being weakened, then they've on top of that, last year, the beginning of the horrors of 2020, in January they had some very serious earthquakes,
And
and that really decimated a lot of the towns on the southern part of the island. It really caused a lot of problems, southern and southwest part of the island, and it's been some areas have not come back. And since then, they actually have continued having earthquakes. They've had aftershocks. Some of them could actually be considered small earthquakes far beyond aftershocks, because some of them have been stronger. There's a fault that has developed south of the island, and we could get into what the causes are. Is it natural? Is it some of the fracking that is being done
Mhm.
of the coast? That's a whole other discussion. But Puerto Ricans are a resilient people.
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans are, it's a beautiful country and a beautiful people. And so there's great hope. There's a new governor after a few years ago, and that's what you were referring to. There was a pretty disastrous situation with the governor where he was basically forced out of office. He was forced to resign. He resigned, and somebody came in as an interim governor, and she did as good a job as she could under the circumstances. And then a new governor was just elected, and there's hope. There's hope that he will be able to manage the situation, but there is still a great, great need. A lot of financial assistance still needed
Mhm.
for the rebuilding of the infrastructure.
Do you think you will be involved in any of that rebuilding there? And I mean, parts that's not residential, but more about the structural integrity of the city. I should.
It's interesting. There's probably ways that I could, but my sense is that there's Puerto Ricans on the island that have been there through thick and thin, and they deserve to get the projects.
Yeah.
My hope would be that if there's any federal work or anything, that it will be given to the professionals that are in the island, that it won't be done given to outside. It's so easy many times for people over here who might have a little bit more connection to get some of that work. But the truth is that the professionals there need that work. And so I
Absolutely.
would hope that they would be the ones to get it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate that very much. Very, very fair of you to say that. That's wonderful. And so, with the work that you do, Have you found any challenges to being a female architect? I mean, has the environment always been welcoming and accepting of
Mhm.
you and your abilities?
No, architecture is not a woman's profession. It has not been traditionally. When I was in school, I was told by a professor that I was a woman and I shouldn't be an architect. And um, interestingly, this is where family background comes in because I had such support
Mhm.
from my dad, my mom. It was my background. I didn't take it in. I didn't take it personal. I basically thought he was stupid and ignorant. So it was more a reflection on him than on me,
Mhm.
that comment.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's not, I mean, I'm used to being usually the only woman, if not one of very few women on construction sites, at meetings. I must say it is changing. It's really exciting to see a new crop of young women, both in architecture and in engineering and in the construction industry. We're doing a project right now, and the project manager is a young woman.
Mhm.
And I find that very exciting to see that the field is opening up for women. But but yeah, it was not traditionally a woman's field. First of all, because it's a STEM career. Actually, it's a STEAM career. I like to make the distinction because it also includes art. You
Yeah.
know, um, and but traditionally it's been men who've
Yes.
done that. So, and then on top of that, being a minority woman that doesn't necessarily look or sound like everybody else
Mhm.
um, has been a challenge. Has been, yeah. Some people don't quite know what to do with that.
But you've overcome that, right? You've overcome that.
You know, how much does one overcome that? It's not so much that you overcome it as much as you sort of you realize, again, going back to that professor, it's more reflection on them. I know who I am. I know what I can do. I know what my ability is. You know, yeah, it might be tough, but everybody, life is not necessarily easy. I don't expect it to be easy, but it saddens me that they would limit themselves by their own prejudices and ways of looking at the world. Um, yeah, it's been challenging for us as a firm.
Mhm.
My husband was born in Haiti,
Uh-huh.
so he's also not white.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, when we show up into a meeting, we're not the establishment. We're not the locals that look a certain way or have gone to certain schools or whatever. Even after all these years, we're still considered people from outside the area.
Yeah.
So it has been hard,
Yeah.
but you know, we're blessed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Every
We're
day.
blessed. Yep.
Every day.
Yep.
So so my daughter is an interior designer.
Oh, okay.
That's her trade. And
Is that what she did at Hampton?
well, that's a long story. But anyway,
It's okay. It's a long story. Okay.
started out to be a doctor and she decided she wanted to color. So we got her a pack of coloring crayons, and so she's good now.
Oh, so you can relate to my struggle. Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I find interesting about her, she has such strong perseverance. So she overcomes almost everything that happens to her. And
Mhm.
as a woman of color in architecture, interior design is also fraught with racism, right? So it's usually another ethnicity's game space. So, but she has done things in the federal government. She's done things, for commercial entities, restaurants, schools, all kinds of things like that.
Mhm.
So, she moved back to North Carolina, and I think it's been constantly one of these struggles to get consistent, reliable business, that comes to you because you've got a catalog of work that you've done. You can show what you have done, but still there are these challenges because you are a Black woman or a brown woman. And so I think that,
Mhm.
what you said about that is really, really important. But in a lot of ways, it's so hard to overcome obstacles that other people put in your way, not because you're different, but because it only belongs, these are the only people we believe can do this work.
Yeah, and sometimes I mean I do go. I should, to be perfectly transparent. There are times where I just, I go through periods where I don't have patience.
Yeah.
And at that point, I am not as nice a person as I normally am. And I will come across a little bit harsher in circumstances, but this is where I've been doing this for a while. I think when you get to be our age, I'm not as afraid.
Yeah.
And so when I'm going through those periods, I will say things to people about, this is not right. And I will just be more in their face because I'm not like your daughter is probably still at the beginnings of her career or in the middle. It's difficult for her to say the things that I can get away with. And because sometimes I just don't have the patience, and I'll be in a meeting and I'll just say, this is just wrong. It's not right. And this is the truth, is that you are treating people differently because of whatever. So yeah, there are times when I'm much more patient than others.
Yeah.
But again, I think because of where I am right now, I'm willing to just be a little bit more in your face than maybe I have in the past.
Well, that's very helpful to hear. I appreciate that very much. Um, so in the space, so this is a diversity chat, and so
Mhm.
in the space of diversity, what you said has been pretty powerful. But can you imagine how many girls hear what you've been hearing and what my daughter hears all the time, and they're then dissuaded from coming into these industries where their ideas and their
Mhm.
thoughts are valued? I mean, I think about it's amazing to look at architecture. It's beautiful. And my daughter, I don't care where we go in the world, she's always going to find a museum. She's got to go to a museum
Right,
and look at all the things in the museum, and
right, right.
I could look at a couple of pictures, but I'm not that cultured in that way. So, but she's so creative and she's so expansive about that. And I always tell her, you've got to keep fighting through this because other little girls need to know that they can. Because
Right.
if there's no role model, there is no process, and I always think about that, like we must do something to diversify these areas where we have been so long taught that it's this person, only these people can do that job.
Yeah, and you know what? One thing I do, I that I am very proactive is whenever I hear of, I'll be approached by somebody at a meeting where it's the Chamber of Commerce, whatever, and they'll say, my daughter is thinking of going into architecture, or my daughter is in her first year of school someplace. And I'll always make it a point to make sure that I give them my contact information and
Mhm.
have them get in touch with me. And I try to meet with them and sort of just talk through them and just be very honest. It's not going to be easy. These are some of the challenges you're going to encounter. It's not an easy profession, period, regardless of who you are, whether you're a man or a woman or black, white, whatever. It is a difficult profession itself that's going through a lot of changes. So I'm very open with them in that, but I also am very open with them in the fact that, whether they're a minority or whether they're, even if they're white, but if they're a woman, it is going to be different. It is going to be different, and there's things that they're going to have to face. But I do try to meet with them. I do try to encourage them, and they know that I'm available to talk to them.
Mhm.
So one thing that I haven't been able to do, even though I have given out my name several times,
Mhm.
uh, and it's interesting who takes advantage of when you open yourself and make them available. But I have not been invited to speak at high schools or um, middle schools. And I have tried. I have given my name to people who are in that environment who would talk about STEM and whatever. And I've said, listen, I'm available. So once years ago, I was invited by somebody to talk to one of their classes, but it hasn't happened as frequently. And I would love to do that because of exactly what you say. They need to see people that um, are sound like them or look like them, or so that they can relate, that it's not the people that necessarily they see on TV or in this image in books of what an architect or an interior designer or whatever looks like. So I try, but there's just so much. Sometimes people say, yeah, we want to open it up for the younger generation, and sometimes I wonder, how much of that is really talk and how much it is real.
Well,
I
I
don't
would
know.
encourage you to find colleges, and specifically community colleges or small colleges, and start there. because that's a
Mhm.
good place to break through the door. I mean, a lot of these places don't even know what they need. And so if they can find a resource like you, then they find themselves on the side of, okay, I can do this. I can get there. But a lot of people, in a lot of instances, this thing that we're, and I hate the word diversity, but a lot of this that we're struggling with is literally because there is um, no place to go to get your foot out, right? So, a lot
Right.
of these little colleges and small schools really would do very well to have someone like you come and talk to them. My
Yeah.
daughter as well, I always encourage her, to share what you can, because, that
Right.
struggle that you went through to get to where you were was not easy.
Right.
And for young people who are easily discouraged, they need to know that there are people out there like themselves who are willing to, go to the mat, and
Right.
understand that once you get down, the count is not over until the referee raises up his hand and say it's over. And that's the kind of stuff we need.
Right. And it's true because I was the other day, I don't know, somebody said something or I read something and I started thinking back. And the truth is that when I was going to architecture school, the only women I knew who were architects were the few women who were teaching
Right.
there.
So
Out in the field, I don't think I ever met a woman architect out in the field.
wow, that's
So,
sad.
and this was New York, so I don't know if it was like they were all in like the big offices, the big companies or whatever, or whether they just weren't there. There is a lack of uh, licensed women architects also. That is, the numbers are not there. So, and that's something that we're all working to remediate.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're able to do that, but I would suggest that if you really want to make an impact, sometimes you have to start, some people are always telling me, you got to, crawl before you can walk, but we've been crawling now so long. What is it going to take for us to be able to walk?
I
What
don't,
literally has to happen before we can walk?
right, yeah.
I just say, at the end of the day, keep trying, don't give up,
Oh, yeah, no, I don't. I always give out, and whenever I hear anybody, I always make it a point to go talk to them and say, listen, here's my card. You can contact me. I'm available. I would love to help, be involved, whatever you need. So, the right person will reach out and it'll be the right time.
yeah, absolutely. I am
Yeah.
going to connect you to my daughter so you and her can chat.
Absolutely, yes.
But let me ask you this. So beyond some of the obvious struggles, what about, how about being retained? You find that diversity is like, so for example, you're doing work for the federal government. And we all know the federal government is supposed to be lack of bias and discrimination, but of course we know that exists too. Do you
Mhm.
find you sometimes struggle finding work because of your ethnicity?
Not so much in the federal work in the sense of, let me backtrack. When we first started our firm, we didn't want to be certified as SWAM, small woman owned or
Yeah.
anything like that. We were like, no, we can do this on our own. We have the experience, we can do it. Um, the truth was that eventually we realized, no, we're going to have to get the certifications. And that has opened a lot of doors. So I am a firm believer in SWAM programs, in, setting in set asides for minority and women owned businesses. I think that they do open doors.
Mhm.
You have to then walk through them and you have to produce or you don't get more work.
Mhm.
Totally fair. I totally agree that you should either you produce or you don't get any more, or you get contracts taken away, which would be right. That's, you have to do that. We're capable. There's enough quality minority owned firms out there to do the work. So absolutely. But I do believe that the federal government has a place and a role. And once you have some of that work under your belt and you have the experience, then we have seen that then it becomes convenient for other companies to hire us because we have the experience.
Right. Absolutely.
But it was those programs that opened the doors for us.
Absolutely.
So,
And a lot
so
of people don't
yeah.
think through that. Think about, yeah,
Yeah,
my-
they think they're doing you a big favor in like a giveaway. No, you still have to produce. You still have to do the work. You still have to work as hard, if not harder, than other people. But it definitely does open the door. And normally it wouldn't be open. I see it a lot in municipal work. Municipal work still, they're trying to change, but we see municipal work is still given to the friend of the friend.
Absolutely. That they're creating that community, the old boys network, you know how you say it.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. So um, that's where a lot of these initiatives to assist some of the smaller women-owned and men and minority-owned firms come in.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see your career going? What's next?
What's next? Um, I'm tired. You know, it feels like it's been a long time of like fighting and going for it. We're at a place though where we have a nice small firm.
Mhm.
We have, it's a very diverse firm. We've made a, on purpose, kind of, sort of. I've managed to put a good team of a good diverse team in our office, and um, we encourage them. But I think at some point, I think within the next 3 to 5 years, we probably will retire from actually running the firm.
Mhm.
We will probably still be involved. I would love to maybe do some teaching,
Mhm.
some public speaking, some just still having a voice in the community.
Mhm.
I think that's really important. And now I have the depth of experience to share,
Yeah.
you know. And so it's not, when we get to this point, you don't want to just like, I don't want to trail into the sunset or how, whatever, you know. There's too much work still left to be done. But it would be nice to not have to worry about the day-to-days of running an office. That can get tiring sometimes.
Absolutely.
um, and there's some young firms that are out there, and I'm very supportive. I know of a couple of small woman-owned firms that I encourage. I've met with the principals several times, and I encourage them, and they know that I have their back, and if I will refer them, even though there's times where we compete, but it's their turn now
Yeah.
to go out there, and it's exciting to see some of the younger generation being so much more proactive than and being allowed to be more proactive, where now it's celebrated and encouraged. And even though some people behind the scenes might go, oh my gosh, I don't know that I can hear one more DEI discussion, I'm sure, I know, you know, that that is happening behind the scenes, that people are saying, oh yes, let's have all of these diversity and, you know, discussions. And you know that behind the scenes they're going, I can't handle it anymore, because it's human nature. And I know that it's a shock to their system, and they're not used to it. But but I'm glad that the younger generation doesn't care what other people say, and they're making it a point to make it a part of their life and of what they stand for.
That's wonderful. So we have just a few minutes. I'm going to
Sure.
leave time for you to talk about whatever you talk about that I didn't cover. So please.
No, this has been very good. I'll tell you one thing that I was on a diversity panel,
Mhm.
and I made one comment, and I've actually had people come back and talk to me about that one comment, and that is that I think as people are trying to diversify their staff and their businesses, their offices, and in some ways, this is a challenge to minority-owned firms. One thing that I have seen in a lot of minority-owned firms is that everybody is minority.
Mhm.
If we're going to change the next generation, we need to start having minority firms hire white Anglos
Yep, I
and,
agree.
and teach them how to work under a different type of person as a
Absolutely.
manager. I think that that's where we're going to really see change. I think that a lot of the young Anglos are open to it, but I think that because we're so wanting to give the opportunity to those who we know have not been given opportunity, we miss out on what a transforming thing it could be if we took the risk of hiring some of these young men and women white Anglos and brought them in and exposed them to having somebody in authority over them who doesn't look like them, who doesn't sound like their parents, their families, their relatives, the teachers they had at school. And I think that some really, really big societal change can come out of that.
I think that's
So
beautiful.
that's something that has become more of an issue for me, that, yeah, that we need to do that. I think that's really important. A lot of these white kids, just the way they think is because they really, truly, and honestly have never known anybody who's in a position of authority who doesn't look like them.
Yeah. I will say my experience in IT of having uh, white people, regardless of their age, report to a black woman is so it's hard for them to even think that's possible, that this person could know something that I would want to know, or this person could lead me. So I think that's a very important
Right.
point that you made. Thank you for sharing that. It's very, very
Yeah.
important. And so um, one, you've got to go into the school systems and find a way. You start out in the community colleges or smaller colleges and you work your way out. You're going to retire soon. So we've got all that done. Is there anything else that you wish to share that we haven't covered? Or is there, a message you want to leave for those people to talk about diversity and architecture and the way that you have?
um, I would just like to maybe just say a little bit about architecture and the beauty of architecture and the fact that architecture, many times people think about architecture as buildings,
Mhm.
and architecture is really about space,
Absolutely.
and whether it's space that's enclosed or space that's created outside, is space and how you have other people experience space. And I think that architects have a lot that can be shared at this time when people are really trying to find space to be.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot that we can bring to this conversation because of that. Because it's not just about brick and mortar,
Mhm.
it's about how do you feel in a space.
Right.
There's more than the five senses. There's also a sense that, and I can't remember the name for it right now, but it's the sense of when you are in a space and you actually feel the space around you.
Mhm.
That's a sense that we all have.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a sense that is being grown and developed and becoming more acute, more in tune in these days. And some good discussions to be had about that.
Absolutely. And I hope you will be contributing to those discussions as you can.
Yes,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you so much for agreeing to chat with me
Thank
today
you.
on
Thank
a
you,
rainy,
Rochelle.
wet Friday afternoon and
Right.
whatever time of day it is. But thank you so much. And as soon as the video converts, I will send you a link to the video. Please watch it. Let me know if I can upload it. Thank you
Okay,
so much
thank
again.
you.
I'm
Thank
very
you.
grateful. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.